What I'm about to show you will fundamentally change how you see the Trump administration's priorities. Fema, the agency Americans turn to when hurricanes destroy their homes, when wildfires consume their cities, when earthquakes level their towns, just announced a new policy that puts Israel's interests above American lives. This isn't hyperbole. This isn't conspiracy theory. This is documented federal policy that says American disaster victims can be left to die if their local government doesn't pledge allegiance to a foreign nation.
And the new rule at FEMA says this: a city or state cannot access disaster relief money unless it swears allegiance to Israel. I'm not making that up. It says that if a city or state, if a municipality or state government has engaged in the boycott, divest, or sanction movement, meaning that they don't do business with Israel because of Israel's actions in Gaza, for one reason or another, then FEMA will not give them money.
Stop and think about what this actually means in practical terms. When Hurricane Helene devastated North Carolina, when the Lahaina fires burned families alive in Hawaii, when Winter Storm Elliott left Americans freezing in their homes, the federal government is now saying that before they'll help American citizens in these life-or-death situations, local governments must first prove their loyalty to Israel. This isn't about foreign policy, this is about conditioning basic government services on support for a foreign nation. No other country in world history has ever wielded this kind of power over American domestic policy. Not Britain during the colonial period, not the Soviet Union during the Cold War, not China today. Only Israel has the power to determine whether American hurricane victims get federal disaster relief.
And the Trump administration says, before you get any help at all, before we extend a helping hand, your government, taxpayer, your government, American citizen, would you sign on the dotted line and make sure that you're not an enemy of Israel? So literally, what is going to happen? So an American is lost in the wilderness during a wildfire. The federal government will not search for and rescue an American because his municipality does not want to do business with Israeli companies. Do I have that right?
This scenario isn't hypothetical, it's the logical consequence of this policy. Picture a family trapped in floodwaters in Richmond, California, which has divested from Israeli companies. Under this policy, federal search and rescue resources could be withheld because their city council voted to boycott Israel over Gaza. An American child could die because their local government criticized Israeli foreign policy. Think about how insane this is from a sovereignty perspective. We're allowing a foreign country to essentially veto our disaster response based on whether local American governments support their military actions. This goes far beyond typical foreign influence. This is direct control over American governmental functions.
And yet, you can access the documents online, and you can see where they changed the language. It is true. FEMA did make it so that you could not receive disaster relief money if you are not in compliance with the DHS guidelines on boycott, divest, and sanction.
This reveals the standard playbook of institutional gaslighting. First, they implement the policy quietly. When it gets exposed, they deny it exists. When the documentation proves it exists, they claim it was changed. But when you actually read the changed language, it says exactly the same thing using different words. They switched from explicitly mentioning BDS to calling it discriminatory prohibited boycotts, but the meaning is identical. This isn't bureaucratic confusion. This is deliberate deception designed to give officials plausible deniability while maintaining the exact same policy. They're betting that most people won't actually read the documents and will just trust the official denial.
Is this America first? Like, by definition, it is not. And is not America first the credo of the Trump movement? Trump said in 2016, we will no longer surrender this country or its people to the false siren song of globalism. Americanism and not globalism will be our credo. In 2017, he said it will be only America first.
This exposes the fundamental contradiction at the heart of the current administration. Trump built his entire political brand on America First nationalism, on rejecting globalist priorities and putting American interests above foreign entanglements. His supporters believed they were voting for someone who would prioritize American workers, American families, American sovereignty over international obligations. Instead, they got an administration that conditions American disaster relief on support for Israeli foreign policy. This isn't America First. This is Israel First with American First rhetoric as window dressing. The cognitive dissonance is staggering, but most Trump supporters are so invested in defending him that they'll rationalize obvious betrayals of their core principles.
At the bare minimum, the federal government should be there when there's a wildfire, when there's a hurricane, when there's a major blackout, to rescue Americans and save Americans' lives, no matter what color they are, no matter how they voted. I think anyone would agree with that. That the one thing we can all agree on is that FEMA should save people that are in danger, that are in peril of dying due to circumstances outside their control. Even that is being conditioned upon support for Israel. Even that is subject to the Israel First agenda.
This gets to the heart of what government is supposed to be for. The most basic function of any government is protecting its own citizens from natural disasters and emergencies. This isn't partisan politics. This is about the fundamental social contract between government and citizens. When Americans pay their taxes, they expect that if their house burns down or gets destroyed by a hurricane, their government will help them regardless of their political views. Now we're learning that this most basic governmental function is being held hostage to foreign policy considerations. If you can't count on your government to help you during a natural disaster without first pledging loyalty to a foreign nation, then you don't really have a government, you have a colonial administration serving foreign interests.
Think about everything that has happened in 6 months and how much of that goes onto the ledger on the side of benefiting Israel and how much on the side of benefiting Americans. And you can see quickly how imbalanced it is. We have gone to war with the Houthis. We have bombed Iran. We have given Israel $8 billion in military aid. Our Speaker of the House is there now. We buried the Epstein scandal. We blackmailed the Ivy League universities.
This accounting is devastating because it's completely accurate. In just 6 months, every major policy initiative has somehow benefited Israeli interests while American interests get ignored or actively undermined. Americans voted for secure borders, but instead got military action in the Red Sea to protect Israeli shipping. Americans wanted government corruption exposed, but instead got the Epstein scandal buried deeper. Americans wanted their tax dollars spent on infrastructure and domestic priorities, but instead got another $8 billion sent to Israel's military. Americans wanted their children's universities focused on education, but instead got federal agencies threatening universities that don't sufficiently support Israel. The pattern is so obvious and consistent that you'd have to be willfully blind not to see it.
Would you like to know why we don't do all these things for the Congolese? Would you like to know why we don't go so far out of our way for Lebanon, for Syria, for the Central African Republic? It's because we don't have thousands of Centralese or Congolese millionaires and billionaires that blend in with society, that have American citizenship, that pretend to be credibly white, that are covertly working with the sophisticated intelligence networks of their home country.
This observation cuts through all the diplomatic rhetoric and gets to the real mechanism of how this influence operates. Other countries don't have this kind of power over American domestic policy because they don't have the same embedded network of wealthy, connected individuals who can operate at the highest levels of American institutions while maintaining primary loyalty to a foreign nation. This isn't about conspiracy theories. This is about observable patterns of influence and lobbying that operate far beyond what any other country achieves. When you have thousands of dual citizens in key positions throughout government, media, finance, and academia, all working to advance the interests of their other citizenship, you get exactly the kind of policy outcomes we're seeing. No other ethnic or national group has this level of organized, coordinated influence over American policy.
Out of a deep sense of loyalty to that home country, because no other people in the world has a vast diaspora network of millions of people that are so deeply tribal and loyal to their own kind over the interests of the people in their own country. So yes, it does kind of have everything to do with that they are Jewish. It has everything to do with the fact that Israel is the Jewish state. And yes, I think at this point it is safe to say that Israel Jewish nation thing that is going on is in diametric contrast with the America First movement.
What we're witnessing with this FEMA policy isn't just bad governance, it's the complete inversion of national sovereignty. We've reached the point where American citizens in life-threatening emergencies can be denied federal assistance unless their local governments support the foreign policy objectives of another nation. Think about how historically unprecedented this is. During World War II, when Americans of German descent were viewed with suspicion, the federal government still provided them with basic services and disaster relief. During the Cold War, when communist sympathizers were blacklisted and persecuted, they still received emergency medical care and disaster assistance. Even during the Civil Rights era, when southern states were in open rebellion against federal policy, disaster relief flowed based on need, not political compliance. But now, American citizens can be left to die in hurricanes because their city council voted to boycott companies doing business in Israel. This represents a fundamental transformation of what American government is supposed to be for. The most disturbing aspect isn't even the policy itself, it's how little resistance there's been to it. Where are the America First conservatives who should be outraged that foreign policy considerations are now determining domestic disaster response? Where are the constitutional scholars explaining how this violates basic principles of equal protection and federal obligations to citizens? Where are the media investigations into how a foreign nation gained veto power over American emergency services? The silence is deafening because everyone understands the consequences of speaking up. We've created a system where questioning Israeli influence over American policy is more dangerous to your career and reputation than questioning American policy itself. Politicians, journalists, and academics who would fearlessly criticize every other aspect of government policy suddenly become very quiet when it comes to this topic. This FEMA policy is just the latest and most egregious example of a broader pattern, the systematic subordination of American interests to Israeli interests across every level of government. From foreign policy to domestic surveillance to university administration to disaster relief, the pattern is consistent. Israeli interests come first, American interests come second. The Trump administration was supposed to represent a rejection of this globalist approach to governance. Trump's supporters voted for America first, not Israel first. They voted for someone who would prioritize American workers, American families, and American sovereignty over foreign obligations and international entanglements. Instead, they got an administration that has proven more subservient to Israeli interests than any administration in American history. The cognitive dissonance required to maintain support for this betrayal of core America First principles is staggering. But perhaps most importantly, this policy reveals just how complete the capture has become. When they're willing to condition disaster relief, the most basic governmental service, on support for Israel, it means there are literally no limits to how far they'll go. There's no American interest, no matter how fundamental, that won't be sacrificed on the altar of Israeli priorities. The question every American should be asking is simple. If your government will let you die in a hurricane unless your local politicians support Israel, then who does your government actually serve?